Hello there, boys and girls. It is I, your typical God-fearing, child-loving, heterosexual woman, probably named something like Mary. Or Karen? I don't know, I haven't thought this character out that far. In either case, we all know that there's a Mrs. before my name, because at 25, if I'm unmarried, then I'm not fulfilling my natural role as a female. Am I right? Yes, nothing sounds better to me than life in the suburbs, with my breadwinner husband and my 2.5 kids, all of whom will be Caucasian and struggling with depression that we don't talk about. Isn't suburban life grand? Really, I don't know why someone would choose any other sort of life. Unfortunately, this year brought us a film that advertises just how glorious this life is. Vivarium. Now, before we get started, make sure to subscribe to this channel and click that little bell thingy to get notified. I post new videos at least once a week, so stick around to the end of the episode to find out what I'll be discussing next. The first odd thing that you might discover about Vivarium is that nobody seems to agree on what the genre is. Wikipedia refers to it as a sci-fi thriller. Rotten Tomatoes labels it a drama, mystery, suspense. And IMDb calls it a comedy, horror, mystery. Considering this channel focuses exclusively on that dreadful genre known as horror, I went back and forth on including this as a review. But as this is one of the very few movies that has succeeded in unnerving me in the last few years, I decided to allow it. Vivarium debuted at the Cannes Film Festival in 2019, being an international co-production between Ireland, Denmark, and Belgium. It didn't see a wide release until March 2020, however. It stars Jesse Eisenberg as Tom and Imogen Poots as Gemma, a young couple looking to move into a new house. They take a trip out to a real estate agency, where this real swell gentleman tells them about a new development called Yonder. Yonder is the sort of place where a woman like me could really thrive, you know? No individuality. All the houses look exactly the same. Everything is controlled and monitored. Even the clouds are fluffy, white, and evenly spaced. The real estate agent shows them around for a little bit before he just disappears. At this point, Tom and Gemma decide to take their leave of this little paradise, driving around the neighborhood, but they can't find their way out. All roads lead back to the house where they started out. They spend the next day or so trying to make it out of this labyrinth of identical houses, all while receiving care packages from someone that they never see. They eventually come up with the idea of burning the house down, but after they do, they wake up on the street in front of it. Everything exactly the same. Well, almost everything. As it turns out, there's another package for them, this one containing a baby, and a note that reads, "Raise the child and be released." And thus, suburban bliss can begin for our two protagonists. They feed the child, teach him about things that he's never seen, like dogs, deal with his temper tantrums, his constant temper tantrums. So much screaming. Holy Satan, who art in hell, make it stop! I can't handle listening to this child scream anymore. This movie is a perfect advertisement for birth control if I've ever seen one. Wait, why am I dressed like a nun? Did I get possessed by a Stepford housewife for a second there? What the fuck? Anyway, my point is, this child is creepy as fuck. It's hard to tell how much of his behavior is on account of his nature, because there most certainly is something wrong with him. He reaches the age of 7 in about 6 months' time. He has a grown man's voice when he's still a child, and for some reason, he perpetually looks like a little kid whose mom dressed him for school picture day. But at the same time, his behavior could be on account of Tom and Gemma's mistreatment of him, because they make no secret of hating him from minute 1. They clearly blame him for their imprisonment in this shiny, happy nightmare, just barely tolerating his existence most of the time. However, things change when Tom becomes aware that the soil in yonder is artificial, which makes him obsessed with digging a hole in the front yard. He even starts pushing Gemma away, and desperate for some sort of human contact, she tries bonding with the creepy nightmare child. But that being said, I did expect this bonding period to be more intense than it actually was. The child's obvious lack of humanity forms a wall between him and Gemma that they can't cross. And things get even worse when the child starts leaving the house every day. Gemma eventually figures out that he's visiting someone, and that someone is even less human than he is. But who or what it is, we never find out. That bit is kept a mystery right up to the end. We never find out who's keeping Tom and Gemma here or why. We do discover that other couples are being forced into raising nightmare children just the same, but we only discover this at the movie's climax, and they seem to exist in parallel dimensions where they can't interact with Tom or Gemma for some reason. No answers are given at any point of the movie. Ultimately, Tom and Gemma are released when they die, but we never find out what the point to any of this was. And sure, we can speculate. We do find out that the nightmare children grow into real estate agents that continue to sell the yonder development, so we can assume that the whole thing is a nest for these creatures, whatever they may be. Perhaps the thing that the nightmare child was visiting was his birth mother or father. But that's just the thing. We can only guess. And that leaves the whole movie kinda meaningless and confusing. So the point must be Tom and Gemma's arc then, right? Maybe there's something in their characters that gives meaning to this story. Well, not really. The pair of them start out as a happy couple. Tom becomes angry, bitter, and obsessed with digging when they're forced into this suburban situation. But his story ends with him assuring Gemma that he loved her and that she gave his life meaning. His story ends where it began. Gemma, meanwhile, starts out not wanting to be a mother. She tries to force herself to bond with the child when she feels like she has no other option. But ultimately, his inhumanity disgusts her, and she ends her story rejecting her role as mother. Again, she ends exactly where she started out. And that's not to say that I wanted to see Gemma accept her role as mother. I've seen more than enough stories that just assume that a woman's natural role is motherhood, and whether she wants a baby or not, all you have to do is give her one and she'll take care of it. It was sort of refreshing to see a woman stand her ground and not wanting to be a mother. That seems rare for a movie. But that does mean that her story doesn't really progress, and we as the audience don't gain anything from watching her. Unless you were one of those people that just assumed that a woman's natural state was motherhood, I guess. But even then, as much as I don't hold that opinion myself, I feel like most people who do would see an awful woman rejecting her proper role before they saw a liberated woman saying fuck you to societal expectations. And while we're on the subject, what does any of this have to do with the suburbs? This movie plays as though it wants to be social commentary on suburban life, something like The Burbs or Pleasantville, which might have been more timely back in the 90s when nice houses in affordable neighborhoods was an actual achievable thing for young people. But even ignoring the outdated message, this movie fails to be any sort of social commentary, mostly because it doesn't reflect what suburban life is actually like. The thing that makes social commentaries like, say, The Truman Show successful is that they reflect not only how the suburbs are, but how they feel. In The Truman Show, Truman lives the life that he does because he's surrounded by people who pressured him into it. People who have subtly told him how to dress, who to marry, what job to have, what to aspire to, so much so that he feels as though he doesn't have a choice. And the twist turns out to be that he actually didn't have a choice. Everything in his life was staged and arranged by the producers of a reality TV show, and it's only by learning this that Truman is able to rebel. Imagine how different The Truman Show would have been if he hadn't been raised there as a baby. Instead, he had been kidnapped as an adult, told that it was a reality TV show from the beginning and that he had no choice but to play along. He probably would have started to rebel a lot earlier. The suburbs, in this situation being a metaphor for the life society expects you to lead, are the way they are because you're raised into it. And the brainwashing is incredibly subtle. Nobody hands you a baby and tells you that you have no other choice than to raise it. Instead, they buy you baby dolls as a little girl, tell you that your biological clock is ticking, and ask when they can expect grandkids. This movie fails to understand the very things that it's satirizing, and as a result, it fails as social commentary. You could say that this movie intends to comment on how forcing a couple to raise a child when they didn't want it and weren't expecting it just ruins everyone's lives, but it even fails in that regard because the child isn't neutral. It's a monster by nature. Maybe if it became a monster through its upbringing, I might see that as a possibility, or if we were meant to sympathize with the child at all. But the child is treated with disdain from minute one because he's always in league with the kidnappers. Maybe if he had joined forces with the kidnappers because he was tired of being mistreated and they were offering something that his adoptive parents just couldn't, then I might see it as a more successful commentary. But that just isn't what happened. But does that mean that it's completely valueless as a movie? No, not exactly. Like I said, this is one of the very few movies that has succeeded in unnerving me in the last few years. And a lot of that is because of the imagery. There is something very eerie about the image of endless identical houses stretching on forever. Or of clouds and trees that are just recognizable for what they are, and there's just something a little off about them, and you can't pinpoint what. And not to mention the mystery of who is doing this and how they know so much about their lives is disturbing. One of the very first scenes that had me completely engaged in this movie is when the real estate agent is showing Tom and Gemma around the house. And it includes a baby's room painted all in blue. Right away, this had my imagination going. How do they know that this couple is going to have a child soon? How do they know that the child's going to be a boy? Who thought to do this? There are several eerie scenes like this throughout the movie, moments that make me want to ask questions and speculate. The problem is that they leave most of these questions open-ended. Overall, I would recommend checking this movie out, if for the imagery alone and for the thrill of what could have been. I went into this movie expecting a brilliant social commentary on the ways that societal expectations affect our lives. And instead I got a movie that was well acted and visually stunning, but it felt like it was about more than it actually was. But hey, with highly metaphorical movies like this, it's always possible that I missed something. If you disagree with my interpretation, let me know in the comments down below, and give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click that little bell thingy to get notified, because next week we're talking about another cult classic, Brain Scan, and you won't want to miss it. Thank you so much for watching, my pets. Love you.